Richard Kelly. So we're going to sit down. We're going to chat. And then these guys are going to listen.
Sure.
And then we have our box, the box, where people put some questions. There's no button on it, but there's questions. Oh, I love your fake laughter, sir. Okay, so maybe we should start at the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, so where, what, how did you sort of conceive of this project early on?
Oh, man. I went to USC Film School, and like many film students, I graduated in a state of panic and terror. I didn't know how I was going to become a film director. I grew up in Virginia. My parents are not in the industry, and I was in Los Angeles, and I had this wonderful education from USC, which is known as being the best film school in the world. Arguably, but we all know it is. It was a scenario where you don't have a plan. It's not easy to break into this business. And I had never written a narrative screenplay before, and I found myself living in Hermosa Beach with a bunch of college friends in some kind of disgusting house, and working at a post-production place in the heart of Hollywood, serving cappuccinos and cheese and cracker plates to P. Diddy and J-Lo, and they were doing their Godzilla video for the Godzilla movie. Cashmere, Come With Me. And Mark Romanek was there with Madonna, all these people I admired, and I was just serving cappuccinos at night, and I was like, I need to write a screenplay. I'm terrified of writing a screenplay. I was a very visual guy, strong art portfolio through high school into college, and I'd done my short films, and I needed to write a narrative screenplay. And so I just locked myself in a room and started working on it. And 6 weeks later, I had Donnie Darko. Wow. And it's quite a long story, and I don't want to tell the whole story, but I got an agent, got it to Drew Barrymore, we got the money, and we made it. That's the extremely short version.
Good story. So I've also heard you talk about the book, The Writer's Way.
The Writer's Journey.
Writer's
Yes.
Journey, which is kind of the book of Joseph Campbell.
Yes.
So does that sort of influence you, the kind of idea of archetypal storylines and hero's journeys?
The thing about the Vogler book, which is, it's very popular and it's very kind of hip to carry that book around as a writer, but that doesn't diminish its significance, because there's a lot of stupid screenwriting books out there that you'll read by people who've never written a screenplay. But this book is pretty smart in the way it taps into the Joseph Campbell mythology of storytelling and all the archetypes, the shapeshifter and the herald and the gatekeeper and the keymaster and Zool. It's a great book. It really is. And I didn't read that book until after I had written Donnie Darko. It was really raw. It came out of me. It was almost like I was 23 years old when I wrote that script, and it was like 23 years of pent-up sexual frustration. I'm kidding about the sexual. There was plenty of that, but I had sex prior to that. But it was just a lot that came out of me in a rush, and then I just had to take a breather, and I had let a few friends read it. My producing partner, Sean McKittrick, read it, and he's like, wow, okay. I read it twice. There's definitely something here. We need to trim it down. It was like 155 pages. And then I read the writer's journey after I had written the script, and I started to realize, oh, I've got a herald. Grandma Death is the herald, and Kitty Farmer is a gatekeeper, or a keymaster, or Zool, or whoever. I don't know the thing. But it all fit together, and it all made me realize that I had written something that fit into this Joseph Campbell archetype, which is basically every story is like the opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Every story that's ever been told is the hero going into the cave to get the treasure, stealing the treasure and trying to escape the cave before the boulder crushes him. Every story ever written is that. The treasure can be anything. It can be the girl's heart. It can be the money that they're trying to steal in the heist movie. It can be anything. It's the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. It's, you can take the tunnel and chop it into pieces and make it nonlinear. It's just that metaphor, that Joseph Campbell metaphor, is something, if you understand it as a writer, you can start to see the skeleton of what you've written and whether it holds up or not. So it's very complicated. It's also very, it's very easy, and that book is something that really just can open some doors for you, I found.
Yeah. Well, you were 23 when you wrote it.
Yeah.
So when you see it now, the vantage point of 10 years on, does it resonate differently with you now that you're in your 30s as opposed to in your 20s?
Yeah, it definitely resonates. It brings back, it's hard for me to watch the movie, it's a very emotional film. All my movies, it's hard for me to watch because I put a lot of emotion and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into them. Probably too much. But it's definitely, it makes me proud of my youth, I guess, in a way, because I somehow got it, I got it on the page kind of just right, even in the first draft. And we went through many drafts of Donnie Darko, but what the first draft was is pretty damn close to what ended up on the screen. And it made me realize that I had a voice, I guess, as a writer, and it gave me the confidence to hold on to it and to not kind of write to the marketplace. So what a lot of writers do is they look at the trends, they look at what's selling, they look at what makes money, and they write thinking, oh, I can sell this, or I can get a studio to buy this, or I can get someone to, to roll the dice on this for very mercenary reasons, I guess. And it just, because it worked the first time out, something that was really pure and raw and honest, it gave me something to hold on to for as long as possible until I absolutely am broke and I have to write to the marketplace. Which everyone eventually has to, if it doesn't continue to, you can be very idealistic and you can try to only write from your heart and be pure and everything, but then you got to pay the bills. So, it's understandable to have to go to that place, but
Would it be possible for you to write something as pure now at this point in your career?
I would hope so. The script I'm working on right now is, I feel like, the purest thing I've written, probably since Darko. It's definitely the most linear, and it's a subjective narrative where the hero is in every scene. Donnie is in 80% of this movie. You cut away to the parents and to the teachers here and there, but Jake is in almost every scene, I'd say. That's something you learn to understand structure the more you go along, and I've written 15, 16 screenplays now. 4 have been made. The 5th will be made very soon, and the others are somewhere out in that purgatorial netherland of unproduced screenplays. But it's something you just learn to understand as you get older, is try to hold on to your voice and just, you don't want to sell out. You don't want to find yourself writing, the movie that's this meets that. Caddyshack meets Beauty and the Beast, or which would be brilliant.
So, I've read a lot of interviews with you where you sort of address the idea of the mainstream and your relationship to it in terms of your films and sort of your sensibilities. I've heard you refer to Donnie Darko as a mainstream film, and I personally would not consider it that, but I'm just kind of curious what your definition of mainstream is and what is your relationship to the mainstream?
Well, I'm desperately trying to work my way into the mainstream. I probably will never truly arrive there, but when I said Donnie Darko had arrived in the mainstream, that's not necessarily true depending on your point of view, but I've seen it over 10 years. I remember when it was a tiny cult film, when it opened, and we had a horrible $1,100 per screen average, and it was just it did not do well when it opened. It was very, very small at first. And I just remember living my life and going out, and people would introduce me as, yeah, he did this movie Donnie Darko, and everyone would be like, huh, I've never heard of it. And over the years, more and more people have heard of it. More and more people have heard of it. And now, when I go and meet someone, their grandma has at least heard of the movie, which is like, wow, their grandma has at least heard of it. She's probably not seen it, but it's for me, it's about as mainstream as it gets. So maybe I'm just trying to live a fantasy that I'm somewhat mainstream. But it is a cult film, it is definitely, but what means so much is that all you people are sitting here 10 years later is that I guess it does connect. And there were, how many hands again, this was your first time seeing it? That's a decent number of hands, so there's some new recruits out here. And it's a movie that does appeal to teenagers and to the disenfranchised or anyone who feels maybe like an outsider or feels misunderstood, which really should be all of us, I think. But to see that, I guess there's new people that are discovering it means a lot, and that if they can understand what these characters are going through from 1988, now we're almost 2012, that means a lot. So, and I also just want to stroke my own ego to think that I'm mainstream, when I'm really not.
So all three of the features you've made all seem like they have potential to become cult films, if they haven't already. Do you feel like it's possible to create a cult film, or is that something that the audience has to do?
I feel like everyone asks me what is the definition of cult, and I guess the best definition I've heard is that it's something that a very small group of people love passionately. And I guess that group of people could be 10 people. There could be 10 people that love a film so passionately that they all masturbate together while watching. That could be a cult film. At its purest form. And then that group of audience gets bigger, and then the cult film becomes bigger. But I think it comes from a place of like sincere love for something that might not have been embraced by the mainstream, that was discovered in a post-theatrical environment, ancillary environment. I think something that is a big hit in theaters is never going to be ascribed to cult status simply because it's something that feels like it needs to be discovered without the benefit of marketing and a lot of kind of, without a corporation telling you it's cool. It's like you figured out it was cool without the corporation pointing you in its direction. Because the corporation didn't understand it and tossed it aside usually.
In terms of, you mentioned marketing, and I remember when The Box came out, which I loved, and it was a big studio film, and it played in the mainstream theater certainly. And the ads for that made it seem like possibly it was a different film than what it ended up being.
Yep.
But I loved what it was more than what it was advertised as. So I'm just wondering, do you have any input into marketing with your films at all?
It all has to do with how much money they're spending. On a film like Southland Tales, where we had been through crazy Cannes experience, we were nominated for the Palme d'Or, and then we got eviscerated at Cannes, and it was just this huge challenge to get the movie finished and get the special effects money, and it took so long that by the time they were going to release it, it was just like, they were like, Richard, we love this movie, but we are not going to spend any money marketing it, and just like, be happy it's getting released. And you're like, I am happy, let's just release it. So I got to help with the trailer for that, and it's gone on to achieve, its own cult status and done very well in the home video realm. But with The Box, it was, it was Warner Brothers, and it was a big multinational corporation, and, you have to play ball with the market. If you're smart, you have to play ball with the marketing department at a studio, and you have to become friendly with them and realize that, they're gonna ultimately do whatever they want, because they have to answer their stockholders, and you just do your best to try to get in there and give them your best input, but they're going to do whatever they want ultimately. And You know, there was a lot of sequences in the box that were a lot of action stuff. It's really cool, and it could make its way back into like a special edition later. A big teleportation chase sequence with James Marsden, and this big padded room sequence at the end, and big set piece stuff that looks great in a trailer for reasons of running time and also just audience confusion, and no special effects money left in the budget. That stuff got cut out of the movie, but the marketing people have all the raw footage to cut the trailer together, and there's sort of a disconnect between the marketing department sometimes and what the final movie is, where it's just like they just want to sell it. And you know what, if they've got... So we ended up with like 8 to 10 shots in the trailer that weren't in the movie, and I was like, oh man. And, you know, but the marketing people were like, but the trailer, we like it, this is what we want. I'm like, well, all those shots aren't in the movie, it's going to mislead people, but, you know, it happens all the time. And you want your movie to get released on 2,600 screens. You're a completely esoteric, Twilight Zone, 70s paranoia, existential melodrama thriller with a depressing as hell ending. You want it to get released on 2,600 screens, and you're like thanking God that it is getting released on 2,600 screens. So you just got to understand you're not always going to get things exactly the way you want them in terms of the marketing, you know. And, you know, eventually the movie finds its way, and people find it.
But you had a great quote that I read once where you said you feel like the best films are those that are the most difficult to market.
Yeah.
Because they don't have an easy pitch line like Jennifer Aniston buys a dog and the dog dies. I'm sure that was a very easy pitch to get money for it.
Yeah.
Terrible, boring movie.
Okay.
So do you think about that when you're sort of coming up with concepts for film? Like, how will the public respond to this? Can I convey the idea of this easily? Is it complicated?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I've definitely always felt that way. Like the title Donnie Darko feels like a comic book movie, but it's an iconic title. You know, I've always thought in terms of iconography, in terms of when I pick a title for my movies. I've always thought of. I always think about marketing. It's part of being a showman, and it's part of what I've learned in my friendships with other filmmakers who are much more successful than I am, in the way that they have branded themselves and probably done a much better job than I have in terms of branding their movies and probably telegraphing what the movie is about. So it's definitely part of the creative process, because you don't want to spend a bunch of time. You know, I've spent almost 2 years on my current screenplay that I'm getting ready to make, and you don't want to spend 2 years on something that you can't sell. You got to think about that. And you don't want to corrupt your creative process and turn your motivation into just bullshit, you know, mercenary stuff. You want it to be sincere, but you know, if you're going to spend all this time on something, make sure you can sell it. You know, don't have a title with 14 words and a question mark at the end or something. You know, don't just think about that kind of stuff. Because I see it when I see some people, they'll write a screenplay and it has like, you know, a title that I've seen like 6 times, or that doesn't make sense, or it doesn't telegraph. So, you know, it's definitely, I'm trying to become more savvy. I'm trying to become more successful, which is you know, a radical concept, but I am trying to achieve that.
We support that. We support that very strongly.
Yeah.
And so this idea of selling your movie, I think everyone knows there was a director's cut of Donnie Darko, which came out in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk just a little bit about why you were forced to cut the version that we saw here?
Well, no, the version that you saw here was the original theatrical cut. What happened was at Sundance, there was a 7 or 8 minutes that got cut out. The screening at Sundance was kind of a disaster. It took us 5 or 6 months to sell the movie. No one wanted to buy it. It was going to debut on the Starz network. It was going to go straight to cable. People start to get really angry as each month goes along and the movie doesn't sell after a festival. It starts to get really grim. It starts to get really sad. And the money people are just like, cut it, cut it, cut it, cut it down more, get rid of that music, drop those songs that we haven't paid for, get rid of all those 80s songs. It was just getting really sad and really grim. And Newmarket Films had just distributed Memento, Christopher Nolan's Memento, and it was doing gangbusters business. To much of everyone's shock, because it was another orphan from Sundance that year, everyone was like, brilliant movie, but we can't sell this. But Newmarket somehow figured out how to sell it, and it ended up making $25 million in the summer of 2001. And Newmarket was like, Bob Burney, who's a great man and who's since gone on to Distribution Glory and many other companies, came in and said, I can distribute this movie. I think we should take a chance on Donnie Darko. They planned this Halloween-themed release. And it was actually Chris Nolan who came in when we were doing the final edit of the movie, who said, hey, don't cut this movie down. You know, he had a few pointers. It was Chris Nolan's idea actually to do the parentheses in each title card, saying how many days remain. We did one little reshoot with Jamie Duvall to show him waking up, because he wasn't in the wake up montage in the Sundance cut. You know, we had to lose the Pet Shop Boys. That was the original Sparkle Motion song, because they wanted like a lot of money, and we didn't have it. Sorry, Pet Shop Boys. And we got the movie like really in a great place, and this is a wonderful cut of the movie. And thank God Newmarket was ready to distribute it, and we started planning a marketing campaign tied into Halloween, and September 11th happened. And that kind of just, it was pretty much over by then. So we were just thankful that it still came out and that it just got to theaters, because it would have been really heartbreaking for it to just debut on like the Starz Network. Nothing against the wonderful people at the Starz Network, but you know, it's a big screen, you know, anamorphic film, and it was a very heavily hyped film at Sundance, and it would have been just a real grim conclusion to the proceedings for it not to get a theatrical release. And if it weren't for that tiny theatrical release, I don't know if we would all be sitting here right now. If it was on the Starz Network, I don't think we would all be here right now. I would probably be directing, you know, soap operas or something.
Lifetime
Maybe
movies.
I should be, yeah.
You should do a Lifetime movie with time.
You know, give it a few years, I might be there.
Yeah. So, your three features are all very different, but they all seem to share certain sensibilities and sort of thematic elements of spirituality and existentialism and
Mindfuckery.
mindfuckery. Kind of this idea of this science and spirituality and the connection. So are those sort of conscious things that you put into the scripts, or are they sort of subconscious for you?
They're absolutely conscious. There's a mythology that links all three films. They're all science fiction films. You know, Darko is very kind of, you know, Stephen King, you know, obviously my very high schoolish literary allusions that permeate each film, really. Someone Twittered me or something like, why is all your stuff so high school and shit, man? Like, get out of high school, dude.
How did you answer that?
I just blocked him. No, there's a mythology that links all three films. I mean, they're all science fiction. You know, there's the metaphysical realm, and there's the liquid, liquid stuff, the saltwater stuff. You know, in all three films. You know, I like to, you know, let people kind of try to put the grand logic together. You know, they're all very personal movies, and you know, Southland Tales was very much influenced by Philip K. Dick and Thomas Pynchon and Kurt Vonnegut. You know, big satirists, big pop culture satirists, and sci-fi, you know, future political nonsense, and Armageddon mythology, and the Book of Revelation. It was a big, huge smorgasbord that sprawled into graphic novels and websites, and you know, it's still an unfinished project in my mind. I still want to finish it, you know, one day. And then the box, you know, was very much influenced by a television program created by Rod Serling that I am afraid to even mention the title of because I've been legally prohibited from doing so by many attorneys. What? I didn't hear that. What was that? It was very influenced by that television program, and and 70s paranoia thrillers, and also my parents' love story and their, you know, personal history, and kind of a meld of those three things together. So, you know, each film comes from its particular place, but there's a link between all of them, and it's, you know, they're all sci-fi movies, really.
But you're kind of moving away from that maybe with your next project. You're not delving into sci-fi.
You know, the next project is in a completely new direction for me, but I will say that it absolutely connects into the universe that I guess I've tried to build, and it's just an advancement forward, I hope, for me. I'm just trying to not repeat myself. I just don't want to keep making the same film over and over again, which actually is a huge mistake, because there's some brilliant filmmakers who kind of make the same film over and over again, and God bless them for it, and maybe that's what I should be doing. No, it's definitely a move forward into a whole new realm, but I also want to make a movie that is a crowd pleaser from the outset. I want to make a movie that people don't look like, you know, their dog just died when the credits roll.
Like that Jennifer Aniston movie.
Wasn't there one where a dog died? Oh,
Yes.
Marley and Me.
That dog died. I spoiled it for everybody.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Okay.
You don't care, you don't want to see it. So speaking of kind of your influences a little bit, the literary references are, you know, you've got a lot of them, obviously. Is it true?
Very high school. They're so high school.
So
Oh my
high
God.
school. Is it true that you did an adaptation of Cat's Cradle, the Vonnegut?
I did. I wrote an adaptation of Cat's Cradle many years ago. I did it for, it was George DiCaprio, Leonardo DiCaprio's father, who, his company hired me to do it, and it was a radical adaptation. That book has 237 chapters, each one is about 1.5 pages long. It's an unadaptable book. It's also an absolutely brilliant book. It's Kurt Vonnegut, you know, for Christ's sake. The script eventually became titled Ice 9, because it was so different. It takes all the ideas and characters and concepts from Cat's Cradle and it turns them into kind of like a 1960s James Bond